It was just past 6:30 a.m. when Officer David Reyes pulled into his usual spot near the corner of Fairview and Martin, the same location where the small strip mall met a quiet residential neighborhood on the east side of town. It was a kind of morning that didn't feel like anything unusual. Gray skies, a breeze strong enough to chase an old fast food wrapper across the sidewalk, and the sluggish pulse of another weekday starting too early. Reyes sipped from his travel mug, black coffee bitter against his tongue, and reached over to power up the dash cam, more out of habit than expectation. The day ahead looked predictable, and in a small town like Meadow Springs, predictable was often code for peaceful, but by 7:15 everything would change, because that was when she ran into the street. At first he thought she was just a kid, late for school. 11, maybe 12, dressed in worn jeans and a hoodie that hung too big off her narrow frame, her shoes slapped against the asphalt like she hadn't had time to tie them properly, and her face pale, eyes wide, was the kind that sent a bolt of instinct straight through him. Reyes knew panic when he saw it. He swung the cruiser door open before she even reached the crosswalk. "Help," she cried, breath heaving, voice cracking. "Please, I need help. My baby sister, she's not breathing." And just like that, the day snapped into focus. The girl didn't wait for permission. She grabbed his hand, tugged him hard, and started pulling him in the direction she came from, her steps jerky, her speech rushing out in fragments. "I tried to call 911, but the phone's dead. We don't have a charger, and my mom's not home. She left real early. I didn't know what to do. She won't wake up. Please, she won't wake up." Reyes didn't hesitate. Training took over. He radioed dispatch with one hand and followed her with the other, sprinting now through back alleys and cut-throughs between houses. As they moved, his mind raced. Where was the mother? How long had the baby been unconscious? What kind of emergency were they walking into? They reached the apartment complex on Danner Street. An aging structure with faded brick, broken blinds in the windows, and a courtyard that had seen better decades. The girl led him to the second floor, apartment 204. Door cracked open. Reyes stepped inside with his hand near his holster just in case, but there was no threat waiting, only the unmistakable stillness of a home where something had gone terribly wrong. On the floor, wrapped in a light pink blanket, was a baby. She couldn't have been more than a few months old. Her skin was pale, her lips tinged bluish gray. She wasn't moving. Reyes dropped to his knees. "What's her name?" he asked, checking for pulse and breath. "Maya," the girl said. "She's 3 months old. Please, please save her." He felt the thready flutter of a heartbeat. Shallow, weak, but there. No breath, though. No rise of the chest. "I need you to stand back, okay?" he said, voice firm but calm. "I'm going to help her. You did the right thing coming to get me." As he began infant CPR, gentle compressions, careful breaths, he could hear the girl behind him whispering under her breath, almost chanting, "Please wake up, please wake up, please don't die." She didn't sob. She didn't scream. She just stood there, steady, watching, praying with every ounce of a child's hope that her baby sister would start crying. And then, after what felt like a lifetime compressed into seconds, the baby gasped. A soft, choking inhale. Then another. Reyes lifted her gently, turned her slightly to clear the airway, and suddenly Maya let out a weak, sputtering cry. It was the most beautiful sound he'd heard in weeks. "She's breathing," he said, turning to the girl. "She's okay. She's going to be okay." And for the first time since he met her, the girl collapsed into herself, knees hitting the floor, hands over her face, as the tension that had carried her across blocks and intersections and alleyways finally broke. It would take hours to piece everything together. The mother, working 2 jobs, had left early that morning and expected to be back before the girls woke up. The phone had died sometime during the night. The apartment had no landline. The neighbors were gone. And when the baby wouldn't wake up, it was her older sister, 11-year-old Naomi Sanders, who took charge, who wrapped the baby in a blanket, who checked for breathing the way she saw once on a TV show, and when nothing worked decided the only option left was to run. No shoes tied, no coat zipped, just the image of her baby sister's face in her mind, and a desperate hope that someone, anyone could help. Back at the station, after paramedics had cleared Maya for transport and CPS had been called to assist, Reyes sat down with Naomi in the break room. She held a paper cup of water, barely touched, her small hands trembling. "You did something amazing today," he told her. "You kept calm, you did everything right." Naomi shook her head. "I didn't know what I was doing. I just ran." Reyes smiled. "You ran the right way. That takes guts." She looked up at him then, tired but steady. "I couldn't let her die. She's all I got." That sentence hit him harder than he expected. It said more than she probably meant. And yet, he understood exactly what she was saying. In that moment, Reyes wasn't just a police officer. He wasn't a responder, or a professional, or a man doing his job. He was a witness to bravery in its smallest, rawest form. A sister's instinct. A child's courage, the kind of heroism that doesn't wear uniforms, doesn't get medals, but saves lives just the same. And as he watched her sit there, quiet, exhausted, her shoes still untied, and hoodie sleeves soaked with tears, he asked himself the question that would follow him for weeks after: what happens to a girl like that when the crisis is over and the world forgets she was ever brave? By the time the sun had climbed past the rooftops and spilled full over the streets of Meadow Springs, word of what had happened at apartment 2A4 was already echoing through the corridors of the police department and across chatter lines of emergency responders. But while others saw the story as a brief blip of heroism in an otherwise quiet day, Officer David Reyes couldn't shake the girl's face from his thoughts. Naomi Sanders. 11 years old. The name alone didn't tell the story. The shoes barely holding together, the hoodie clearly handed down more than once, the tone in her voice that didn't sound like a child at all. That was the story. And most of all, the look in her eyes as she sat across from him in the precinct break room, eyes too tired and too alert all at once. Not the gaze of someone shaken by a one-time emergency. No, it was the gaze of someone used to emergencies. CPS arrived within the hour. A polite, efficient woman named Tanya who greeted Reyes with a clipboard already half filled. Naomi stayed quiet as the questions began, sitting upright in the same chair, hands folded like she'd been coached 1,000 times before. Name, age, school, who lives with you, any known relatives, where's your mother now? Naomi answered everything, her voice steady, her eyes drifting now and then to the hallway where paramedics had carried Maya out. "She's okay, right?" Naomi asked again. Tanya smiled softly. "She's stable. They'll keep her overnight, just to be sure." And again that slight nod from Naomi as if acknowledging news she was prepared to hear no matter the outcome. While Tanya made calls and typed notes into her tablet, Reyes lingered nearby, not out of obligation, but instinct. The more he watched Naomi, the more something inside him stirred. A protective ache, a quiet fury at the silence with which children like her were left to navigate chaos. After Tanya stepped out to consult with her supervisor, Reyes pulled up a chair. "You hungry?" he asked. Naomi shrugged. "Not really." He didn't press. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded. "When your sister wasn't breathing, were you scared?" She hesitated before answering. "I couldn't think about being scared. If I stopped to feel scared, I might have messed up." Reyes let the silence sit for a moment. "That's a brave thing to do." Naomi's face twisted a little, like the word brave didn't sit right. "I didn't feel brave," she said. "I felt like I didn't have a choice." And Reyes understood. Sometimes courage wasn't a choice. It was survival, a reflex that came when you had nothing left but the will to try. As CPS processed their notes, One concern emerged quickly. Naomi and Maya's mother, Trish Sanders, was unreachable. 2 phone numbers rang to voicemail. A third belonged to her employer, who confirmed she'd left her housekeeping shift hours ago and hadn't called in. It wasn't the first time authorities had tried and failed to track down a parent in similar circumstances, but that didn't make it easier. Protocols kicked in. Naomi and Maya would be placed into temporary protective custody. A foster placement would be arranged by evening if no family could be found. Tanya explained it all to Naomi in a gentle, careful tone. No blame, just facts, but even so, Reyes watched the girl's posture stiffen. "Will we be together?" Naomi asked. "I won't let anyone split us up." Tanya offered reassurances, but Naomi had already heard what she needed. She turned to Reyes, eyes locking with his. "Please," she said, "can you stay until they find a place? I don't want her to wake up without someone she knows." That was the moment Reyes stopped thinking of this as just another call. He called his supervisor and requested the rest of the day off duty. Officially, he framed it as follow-up support on a sensitive juvenile case. Unofficially, he just couldn't bring himself to leave. Not yet. While Tanya continued her paperwork and Naomi sat drawing shapes in the corner of a notebook, Reyes drove to the hospital. Maya was resting in the neonatal unit, monitors blinking, nurses calm. Reyes watched her through the glass. So small, so unaware of the storm she'd been rescued from. A nurse approached. "You a relative?" He shook his head. "Just someone who got there in time." She smiled. "Well, thank you. She's stable now." "Lucky girl?" Reyes nodded. "Yeah, lucky. And not just her." Back at the precinct, Tanya had hit a wall. No family had responded. No next of kin listed. The father's identity was unknown or withheld. Naomi hadn't said much, and no one pressed too hard. Time was running out to arrange placement. Reyes stood at the edge of the hallway, watching Naomi clutch Maya's baby blanket like it was the only anchor she had left in the world. And in that moment something clicked into place. He made another call. This one to an old friend from college, now a family court attorney in the next county. He didn't say much, just asked for a breakdown of options, hypothetical scenarios, what could be done, who could intervene. The answers weren't simple, but they were clear enough. Temporary guardianship, emergency foster certification, monitored placement, paperwork. A process, but possible. That night, after CPS transported the girls to a temporary holding center for minors, Reyes drove home in silence. His apartment felt too clean, too quiet. He hadn't had a family of his own in years. No wife, no kids, not since the last relationship fell apart under the weight of schedules and late-night calls. But something in him stirred now, louder than the usual whispers of doubt. He sat at his kitchen table, stared at his phone, and did something he hadn't done in a long time. He prayed, not formally, not out loud, just a soft, desperate thought cast into the dark. Let them stay together. Let them land somewhere safe. And as the clock ticked past midnight, one final question sat with him, impossible to ignore. What if that safe place could be me? By sunrise, Officer David Reyes was staring at a pile of legal documents he barely understood, sitting at his kitchen table with a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. The world outside his window was starting to wake up, traffic humming, birds scattered across rooftops, the low thump of a delivery truck on the corner, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. All night, he had been thinking about Naomi, the way she sat still in that chair, refusing to cry, too grown up for her years. The way she asked him not to leave them alone. And the most haunting part of it all, the fact that she never once allowed herself to fall apart. That kind of composure didn't belong to a child. It belonged to someone who had learned too early that no one else would hold it together if they didn't. And Reyes knew what that felt like, in his own way. His childhood hadn't been violent, but it had been full of absence. A father who came and went. A mother who held everything inside. He understood the silence of survival, and he recognized it in Naomi. He had spoken again with his friend, the family court attorney, who outlined in detail what temporary guardianship would involve. It's not fast, she warned him, but in cases like this, where the parent is absent and no immediate relatives come forward, the court will often give weight to whoever is already stepping in, especially if the child has expressed attachment. He asked the hard questions. Could he do it while still working full-time? Would the department support it? What kind of scrutiny would he face? The answers were encouraging, though not without obstacles. He would need to attend parenting classes, submit to a home inspection, and provide references. But the biggest factor, his friend said, would be consistency. They'll want to see that you're not just a good man in a uniform. They'll want to know you're going to stick. That morning, Reyes filled out the first round of paperwork, an official expression of interest in temporary guardianship for Naomi and Maya. It wasn't a commitment yet, but it placed his name in the system. It bought him a seat at the table. When he arrived at the station, his shift commander, Sergeant Jennings, met him at the door. CPS called, he said. Said, you're thinking about stepping up for the girls. Reyes nodded. Just doing what feels right. Jennings studied him for a moment before responding. You always were the one who couldn't walk away from something once your heart got involved. Reyes didn't deny it. He just asked for the rest of the day off and got in his car. Meanwhile, Naomi and Maya were placed in a temporary foster home. A woman named Marlene, with a warm kitchen and soft voice, but still a stranger. Naomi didn't complain, she didn't cry. But she clung to Maya like she was the only thing in the world. She still recognized. That night, when Marlene offered pizza, cartoons, even a bath with bubbles, Naomi declined politely. We're just tired, she said. She lay down on the mattress, one arm over her baby sister, eyes wide open long after the room had gone dark. The next afternoon, Reyes was cleared to visit. Naomi met him at the door with a cautious smile. She's okay, she said, before he could even ask. She cried last night, but I think it was just because she was hungry. I rocked her, and she stopped. Reyes stepped into the living room, heart clenching, at the calm, matter-of-fact way Naomi spoke about it all. He sat across from her and watched as Maya slept in a bassinet nearby, cheeks pink and breathing even. You did good, he said softly. Naomi just nodded. Then she asked, why are you really here? He thought about that, because I don't think people should forget the ones who do the right thing, even when they're scared. Over the next few weeks, Reyes returned often. He brought a notebook and colored pencils, a soft bear for Maya, snacks, stories, quiet company. Naomi started to soften. She drew pictures him in his uniform, her holding Maya, a house with flowers in the yard and curtains in the windows. Is that your house? He asked one day. She shook her head. It's the one I want us to live in. He didn't respond, just reached across the table and handed her a fresh set of markers. Then let's draw it together. CPS began processing Reyes' request. The interviews, the references, the background checks. It was intrusive, thorough, necessary. He answered every question honestly about his childhood, his work, his reasons. Because she saved her sister's life, he told them, and she deserves someone who won't forget that. Naomi sensed the shift. She began asking questions of her own. Do you cook? Do you have a couch we could all fit on? Do you like cartoon? And one day, simply, would you want us to stay? He didn't answer right away. Just looked at her, this girl who had carried the weight of motherhood on her tiny shoulders, and said, yeah, I would. As the weeks passed, Maya started gaining weight again, eating regularly, smiling in that uncoordinated way babies do when they recognize a voice or a face. Naomi's drawings grew brighter, fewer grays, more pinks and yellows. She stopped flinching when someone knocked at the door. She started laughing again, quietly, but often Then Reyes began to imagine a version of his life that didn't end when he took off his badge at the end of the shift. He imagined coming home to two girls, one asleep in his arms, one asking if they could watch a movie before bed. It terrified him. It overwhelmed him. But more than anything else, it grounded him. The night before the court hearing, he couldn't sleep. He paced his apartment, straightened the furniture 3 times, reheated his coffee twice without drinking it. He thought about every mistake he'd made in his own life, every doubt that had kept him alone. And then he thought about Naomi, standing in a police station lobby in shoes too big and eyes too steady, asking for help, not because she was brave, but because she had no other choice. That's what gave him peace. That's what told him he wasn't running away from anything this time. He was finally choosing to stay. The morning of the court hearing arrived like the moment before a storm, tense, quiet, holding its breath. Officer David Reyes sat in the parking lot of the county juvenile courthouse in his civilian clothes, a suit jacket too stiff around the shoulders, tie slightly off-center. No matter how many times he adjusted it, he wasn't nervous because he feared doing the wrong thing. He was nervous because, for the first time in a long time, he wanted something he couldn't control. He wanted those two girls, Naomi and Maya, to be safe, to be seen, to be anchored in a life that didn't demand so much from them so young. And for reasons he couldn't fully articulate, he hoped that life might begin with him. Inside the courthouse, Naomi sat on a bench, outside courtroom 4B, Maya asleep in her arms, a soft white blanket wrapped around the baby's legs. Marlene, their temporary foster guardian, sat nearby, whispering reassurances, and smoothing Naomi's hair with motherly instinct. But Naomi's eyes weren't on Marlene, they were locked on the courtroom door, as if she could already see the outcome written behind it. She didn't fidget, didn't ask questions, just held Maya like a shield. When Reyes approached, Naomi looked up and offered a ghost of a smile. "You came. I said I would," he replied. "You okay?" Naomi shrugged. "I will be. I just want them to let us stay together." Reyes sat down beside her. "That's what today is about." The judge was a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice, the kind of person who had seen too much to be swayed by theatrics. Reyes stood when called, answering each question carefully about his background, his reasons, his ability to care for 2 children, one of them an infant. He wasn't trying to impress. He was just being honest. "I'm not perfect," he said at one point. "I work long hours. I live alone. I've never been a parent before, but I know what it means to protect people. And I've seen what Naomi's been through. She doesn't need saving. She needs space to breathe, to be a kid again. If I can give her that, even a little, I want to." Naomi was asked to speak as well. Her voice was soft but clear. "He didn't have to come that day. He didn't have to stay with us. But he did, every time. And I trust him." When the judge asked if she understood what guardianship meant, Naomi nodded. "It means we'd have a home that doesn't disappear." The room was silent for a moment. Even the court clerk looked up. And in that moment, all of Reyes's uncertainty melted into something heavier, more permanent. He wasn't here to fix them. He was here to show them they weren't alone anymore. After hours of testimony, cross-verification, and procedural statements, the judge finally made her ruling. In the interest of the children's emotional stability, and in light of Officer Reyes' demonstrated commitment, I am granting temporary guardianship pending continued supervision and evaluation. Placement will begin immediately. Reyes didn't breathe for a full 10 seconds. Naomi turned to him slowly, like she didn't want to believe it until she heard it again. "You mean we can go?" she asked. Reyes nodded. "We can go." They didn't celebrate, there was no applause. Just a quiet, collective exhale as paperwork was signed and documents exchanged. Later, as they packed up Maya's things and walked toward the parking lot, Naomi asked, "Can we stop and get diapers?" Reyes smiled. already in the trunk, and with that, they drove away from the courthouse. Not rescued, not redeemed, but rewritten. The first few days were a whirlwind. Setting up the second bedroom, installing a crib, sorting through donations from friends and neighbors, clothes, toys, baby gear. Reyes had never been so grateful for his community. People showed up, officers on his shift dropped off boxes, a local cafe owner offered free lunches for a month. Even Sergeant Jennings came by with a box of picture books and a nervous look on his face. "I'm not great with kids," he said, "but these were my nieces." She said Maya needs them more now. Naomi adjusted with the quiet resilience of someone who was always prepared to adapt. She helped with Maya without complaint. Started school a week later, ate her meals in thoughtful silence, as if she was still trying to figure out if it was all real. Reyes gave her space. He didn't hover, but he made sure she knew he was there, driving her to school, sitting at the table while she did homework, watching cartoons with her, and pretending he didn't like them. He caught her smiling more, sleeping deeper, laughing once, unexpectedly, at a corny joke on a kid's show. Maya was a different story, at least at first. She cried often, woke up multiple times a night, needed bottles, baths, and more patience than Reyes knew he had. But every morning when he picked her up from her crib and she wrapped her tiny hand around his thumb, he felt something shift. She was learning to trust. So was he. There were moments of doubt, of course. Nights when Maya wouldn't settle, and Reyes questioned whether he was in over his head. Mornings when Naomi seemed distant and he wondered if she missed the life that came before. But each time, something brought him back. The way Naomi left her shoes by the door without being asked, the sound of Maya's breathing as she slept curled against his chest, the notes Naomi started leaving on the fridge, written in colored pencil. "Maya needs formula. I'll clean my room later. Don't forget the parent-teacher meeting on Friday." One Saturday afternoon, after a trip to the grocery store, Naomi sat on the couch, folding laundry while Maya napped. Reyes was fixing a cabinet door in the kitchen when she spoke. "You know what I remember most about that day?" she asked. "Which one?" he replied. "The day I ran to get you." Reyes looked up. "What?" "I remember thinking, he'll know what to do. I didn't even know your name. But I knew." He walked over, sat beside her, and for a moment they just sat there, side by side, folding socks, and letting the silence say what words couldn't. "Thank you for running," he said eventually. "You saved more than your sister that day." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the living room floor, Reyes watched the girls he hadn't known a few months ago fill his home with something it hadn't seen in years' life, and in that quiet he made himself a promise: no matter how hard it gets, I won't run, not from them. Not from this. GG. By the second month, the new normal began to take shape. It wasn't perfect. Reyes still burned toast twice a week. Maya still woke up screaming at 2 a.m. some nights. Naomi still flinched slightly when someone knocked too loudly at the front door, but within the uneven rhythms of their evolving home, something gentle was blooming. Routine, however fragile, was taking root. There were school drop-offs in the morning, diapers and formula runs at lunch, late-night loads of laundry and early evening math homework spread out on the living room rug while cartoons hummed softly in the background. And though Reyes felt exhausted more often than not, it was a kind of exhaustion that came with meaning. He wasn't just filling time anymore, he was filling lives. Naomi had begun to open up in small, quiet ways. It didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic moment, no single confession that unlocked her world. But it was in the little things, the way she started calling him David less and hey more, How she started writing lists on the kitchen whiteboard without being asked, how her laughter stopped sounding like a survival reflex and started sounding like joy. One night Reyes caught her singing to Maya in the nursery, a soft, made-up lullaby that she barely whispered. He didn't say anything, just stood outside the doorway, letting the fragile beauty of it sit in his chest like a weight he never wanted to lose. Still, there were cracks. Not everything healed with time. One afternoon after school, Naomi came home upset. She didn't slam the door, didn't yell. She just dropped her backpack by the couch and curled into a ball on the rug, face pressed into her knees. Reyes sat down beside her, unsure whether to speak or wait. Eventually, she mumbled, "We were supposed to draw our families in art class." He nodded, and she looked up, eyes red. "I didn't know what to draw. Everyone else has moms and dads." I didn't want to lie, but I didn't want to explain either. He reached over and gently tapped her hand. "So what did you do?" She shrugged. "I drew a policeman, and a baby, and a big sun." Reyes smiled. "That sounds about right." She looked at him. "It's not normal." He shook his head. "No, but it's real. And sometimes real is better than normal." She didn't smile, but she leaned into him, just slightly. That was enough. Parenting without preparation is like running a marathon barefoot. You can move forward, but it hurts. Reyes learned that every day. He learned to pack lunches with things Naomi would actually eat. How to swaddle Maya properly, how to schedule doctor's appointments around shift rotations, and how to explain the difference between temporary and forever to a child who only understood loss. But he also learned the things no manual could teach. How to recognize when Naomi was slipping into silence, not because she was angry, but because she was scared. How to soothe Maya back to sleep using a rhythm of soft humming and rocking he never knew he had in him. How to recognize in himself the slow transformation from rescuer to father figure, not because he was trying to be her dad, but because she was learning to depend on him like he already was. One evening, just after dinner, Naomi came into the kitchen while Reyes was washing dishes. "Can I ask something kind of weird?" she said. He turned off the water and gave her his full attention. "Of course." She hesitated. "Do you ever wish you could go back to before?" He frowned slightly. "Before what?" "Before me. Before Maya. Before all of this." He set the dish down slowly. "Why are you asking that?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Sometimes I feel like we messed everything up for you. Like maybe your life was easier before." Reyes knelt down so they were eye level. "Naomi, look at me." She did. "My life was quieter before. It was simpler. But I wouldn't trade what I have with you and Maya for any of that quiet. You didn't mess up my life, you made it matter." Her lip trembled, and for a split second he thought she might cry. But she didn't. She just nodded, whispered okay, and went to get Maya ready for bed. Later that night, Reyes couldn't sleep. He lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how much this girl had already carried, how every compliment seemed to brush up against a fear she couldn't quite let go of. He made a mental note to talk to Tanya, their CPS worker, about therapy options, not because Naomi was broken, but because she deserved a space to be heard. She deserved to heal out loud. The next week, Reyes met with Tanya during her scheduled home visit. After checking the kitchen, the girls' sleeping arrangements, and their updated vaccination records, she asked how things were going emotionally. Reyes told her the truth. "I think Naomi is doing great, but I think she's still waiting for the other shoe to drop, like if she relaxes too much, something bad will happen." Tanya nodded. "That's common. Kids who've had instability tend to fear comfort, because comfort feels temporary." She paused. "Would you be open to family counseling?" Reyes didn't hesitate. "If it helps her, we're in." They started sessions a week later, once a week, at a small counseling center tucked between a bakery and a bookstore downtown. The therapist, a warm, patient woman named Jordan, had a gift for creating space. At first, Naomi barely spoke, but over time she opened up in pieces. She talked about the night Maya stopped breathing, about the phone battery that wouldn't charge, about the sprint through alleyways, not knowing if anyone would believe her or even listen. She talked about her mom, how she loved her, how she also feared her unpredictability, and she talked about Reyes, how she didn't know if he was going to stay. Jordan asked her, "Do you want him to?" Naomi didn't answer right away, but eventually she whispered, "Yeah, I just don't know if I deserve that." Reyes fought back tears in that moment, not because he was sad, but because he recognized something in Naomi that he'd fought in himself for years, that whisper of unworthiness, that doubt that love could stick. He leaned forward, took her hand, and said, "You do, and I'm here to prove it." That night, after counseling, Naomi asked if they could stop for hot chocolate. They sat in the back corner of the cafe, Maya asleep in her carrier, warm mugs in hand. Naomi took a sip, then looked up and said, "If we ever get to stay forever, would that mean I could just call you Dad?" Reyes blinked. He wasn't expecting the question. He wasn't ready for the tears that welled up either. "Only if you want to," he said quietly. She nodded, smiling for real this time. "I think I'd like that." Summer arrived quietly, with golden afternoons and the scent of cut grass trailing through open windows. For the first time in years, Naomi didn't feel like she had to keep her backpack by the door. She started sleeping in, not because she was lazy, but because her body finally trusted that there was no alarm set for sudden chaos. Maya was now crawling, babbling syllables that sounded like secrets and songs, her laughter filling corners of the apartment that used to echo in silence. Reyes found himself caught in a rhythm he never expected: cereal at 7, daycare drop-offs at 8, police calls and reports during the day, and dinner by 6 with a toddler in one arm and Naomi telling him about the weird facts she learned from books she now devoured, cover to cover. It wasn't glamorous. Reyes had traded in late-night video games and impromptu weekends away for diaper runs, spelling quizzes, and arguing with insurance agents about pediatric billing codes. But it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a trade-up. Each time Maya fell asleep on his chest or Naomi slipped a new drawing under the fridge magnet labeled "Look," he was reminded that this life, unexpected, heavy, messy, was also full of quiet, sturdy joy. He wasn't just building a home, he was becoming someone's constant, and that feeling, being needed and showing up without fail, was a kind of redemption he hadn't realized he was chasing. But stability, as Reyes was learning, always came with a shadow. At a routine check-in with CPS, Tanya entered the room with her usual calm, but held a file he hadn't seen before. "We've heard from Naomi and Maya's mother," she said gently. Reyes felt his body go still. "She's in a recovery program, out of state. She started the legal process of reestablishing contact." The words hung in the air like fog. Naomi wasn't in the room. She was at a summer art camp the center had recommended, but Reyes could already feel the questions boiling in his chest. What does that mean? What's the timeline? Are they going to try and reunify them? Tanya didn't jump ahead. Right now it means she's asking for monitored communication, letters, updates, eventually, maybe video calls. Reunification is always the court's long-term goal, but there's no guarantee and no timeline. That night, Reyes didn't sleep much. He sat at the dining table, reading over the court notice Tanya had given him, and then reading it again. Maya was too young to understand any of it. But Naomi would understand all too well. She'd lived the inconsistency, the long stretches of silence, the broken promises, the nights when she'd had to become mother, nurse, cook, and protector, because no one else showed up. Reyes worried not just about what her mother's reappearance would mean, but about what it would undo, and yet he knew better than to stand in the way of it. Children, even the most hurt ones, often loved fiercely the very people who had failed them. That love didn't disappear. It just folded itself under survival. He waited 3 days before talking to Naomi. They were sitting on the balcony, Maya asleep inside. Naomi was sketching a dog in her notebook. Reyes cleared his throat gently. "I got a message from Tanya." Naomi didn't look up. "From my mom?" she asked. Reyes nodded. "She's in a recovery program. She's working to get better. She wants to send you a letter." Naomi's pencil stilled. "A letter? Yeah, just a letter for now. If you want to read it, you can. If you don't, that's okay too." Naomi didn't speak for a long time. She just stared out at the horizon, the sun melting behind the rooftops, like the end of a long orange sentence. "What if she wants us back?" Naomi whispered. "What if I have to leave?" Reyes turned to her, his voice steady. "Naomi, no one is going to take you away tomorrow, or the day after. Nothing happens without the court reviewing everything. And even then, you'll have a say. You're not a baby. Your voice matters. Now." She looked up finally. "Does she get to decide again?" Reyes hesitated. "She gets to try. But that doesn't mean it erases what you've built here, or what we've built." Naomi nodded. "Okay," and that was the end of it for now. The letter arrived a week later. It was handwritten in blue ink, on lined paper, filled with soft apologies and promises, memories of lullabies and birthday cupcakes, and the aching tone of someone trying to reconnect with something already slipping away. Naomi read it in her room. She didn't cry. She folded it carefully and placed it inside her desk drawer. That night she told Reyes, "I'm glad she's okay, but I don't want to go back yet." Reyes only said, "I hear you," and that, it seemed, was enough. But not everything was easy to navigate. Reyes started noticing small shifts in Naomi's behavior. She became quieter, more cautious, like she was bracing for disappointment. She didn't know how to articulate. In therapy, she talked more about memories, about the times her mom made pancakes on the floor when the stove broke, or danced with her in the living room when Maya was still in her belly. "I loved her so much," Naomi said one day. "I still do, but love isn't always safe." Reyes sat through those sessions with a heart full of lead. He knew he couldn't erase that love. He didn't want to, but he also knew he had to make sure Naomi understood that love could also be steady, that it didn't have to vanish when things got hard. So he started doing something small but intentional. Every Sunday night before bed, Reyes would write a short note on a sticky pad and leave it on Naomi's nightstand. Notes that said, "You were brave today," or "Thanks for being such a great sister," or "I'm proud of the person you're becoming." Naomi didn't mention them. Not at first, but she never threw them away. And one night Reyes walked past her room and saw that she had started sticking them to the wall, one above the other like a ladder made of love. Late that summer, Tanya called with an update. The court had set a formal review for the case in 4 weeks. Naomi's mother had met her recovery milestones and was now petitioning for a gradual reunification plan. "It doesn't mean anything happens right away," Tanya said, "but it does mean we'll need your statement." And Naomi's. Reyes thanked her, hung up, and sat in the silence that followed. That evening he took Naomi and Maya to the lake. They brought sandwiches and juice boxes, a blanket, and a kite Naomi had begged for at the corner store. They didn't talk about the letter, or court, or the mother across state lines trying to rewrite her role. They just sat together, chasing wind and sunshine. At one point, Naomi turned to him and asked, "If I have to go, will you still remember us?" Reyes didn't blink. "I won't remember you. I'll fight for you every day until someone makes me stop." She looked at him, wind in her hair, eyes impossibly old and impossibly hopeful. "Then I'm not scared anymore." And as the kite danced above them, tangled in wind and sky. Reyes knew one thing for sure. No matter what the court decided, no matter what papers were filed or hearings were held, he had already become something permanent in her story. And she, in his... The weeks leading up to the court hearing passed in slow-motion tension, like walking through thick fog with only faint outlines of what waited ahead. Officer David Reyes kept his composure outwardly. He still woke up early to make breakfast, still packed Naomi's lunch with a handwritten note inside, still held Maya in his arms after bath time while singing off-key lullabies, but inside the pressure was growing. It wasn't the fear of failure that troubled him most. It was the idea that everything he'd built with Naomi and Maya, every late-night feeding, every therapy session, every tiny hard-earned moment of trust, might be dismissed as temporary by a system that didn't always see what really mattered. Naomi could sense it too, though she didn't ask many questions. She wasn't trying to ignore what was coming. She was bracing for it. Reese recognized the signs, the way she double-checked the calendar, the increased time she spent quietly in her room drawing, the moments when she'd suddenly appear in the kitchen just to ask if he was still going to be home later. She wasn't clingy. She was just preparing herself for impact in case something was about to break. And that broke Risa's heart in a way even years on the force hadn't prepared him for. They talked about the court hearing openly but gently. Tanya helped facilitate the conversations with care, always making space for Naomi's voice to be central. "The court will ask what you want," she told Naomi during one of their prep sessions. "It's not just about your mom's progress, it's also about how you feel. And what's best for Maya." Naomi listened, nodding, her eyes dark and steady. "What if I say I want to stay and they send me back anyway?" she asked. Tanya replied, "Then we try again, and again, and again, if we have to. Because your voice matters, Naomi, and you're not alone." In the days before the hearing, Reyes arranged to take leave from the department. He cleared his caseload, handed over duties, and briefed Jennings, who simply nodded and said, "You're doing the right thing, Reyes. Just don't forget to breathe." Reyes smiled at that. Breathing had become harder lately, but not because of panic. It was the weight of loving them so much, the kind of love that felt fragile and fierce all at once, like cradling a flame in your palms and trying to keep it safe from the wind. One night, just a few days before the hearing, Naomi couldn't sleep. She came out to the living room where Reyes was reading through Maya's pediatric records, and sat beside him, legs folded, eyes heavy but wide open. "Do you think she's really better this time?" she asked. He closed the folder slowly. "I think she's trying," he said carefully, "and I think trying matters. But I also think you deserve stability, and Maya deserves safety. That's what I'll say in court." Naomi leaned against him, resting her head on his arm. "I want her to be better," she whispered, "but I don't want to go back." Reyes rested his chin on her head. "You shouldn't have to choose between love and safety," he said. "No one should." The day of the hearing came with overcast skies and traffic that crawled too slow for comfort. Reyes wore the same suit from the last hearing, this time with a tie Naomi had picked. Dark blue with tiny silver stars, because stars mean you're still there, even if no one sees you, she said when she gave it to him. Maya was left with Marlene, who offered to babysit for the day, freeing Reyes to focus on Naomi. They sat together outside the courtroom again, but this time Naomi reached for his hand first. "If they say we have to go back, what happens to you?" she asked. He looked at her, unable to lie. "Then I fight for you, and I don't stop until someone makes me." She nodded once, and didn't let go. Inside, the courtroom was quieter than before. The judge was the same, calm, thoughtful, alert. Naomi's mother sat across from them at the other table, her hair pulled back tightly, face lined with fatigue and tension. She looked healthier than before, but there was still a restlessness in her posture. Tanya presented the updates. The mother had completed every program checkpoint. rehab, counseling, job training, but her living arrangement was still temporary. She was applying for stable housing. She had written weekly letters to Naomi and made every effort for scheduled video calls. It was a case that lived somewhere in the gray, technically solid, emotionally complicated. Then it was Naomi's turn. The courtroom hushed as she stepped forward, her voice small but unwavering. "I know my mom's trying," she said, "and I'm glad. I really am. But I've been trying too. And I've built something now that makes me feel safe. I get good sleep, I go to school, and don't worry if someone will pick me up. My sister gets her medicine on time. We laugh at dinner. We're okay, and I don't want that to stop." The judge leaned forward. "Do you want to live with your mother again?" Naomi swallowed hard. "Not yet," she said. "Maybe someday. But not yet." And with that she walked back to Reyes and held his hand again tightly this time. Reyes gave his own statement. He kept it simple, honest. He spoke of routine, of stability, of Maya's growth and Naomi's quiet courage. "I didn't plan for any of this," he said. "But they're not just children I'm helping. They're family now, and I want to keep showing up for them, if the court lets me." There were more voices, more testimonies, but everything blurred after that. Reyes didn't hear the closing arguments. He only heard the silence that followed, the kind that held possibility and threat in equal measure. When the judge finally returned with a ruling, it felt like the air in the room had been suspended mid-breath. In consideration of the progress made by the biological mother, the judge began, and the expressed desires of the minor child, as well as the consistent and appropriate care provided by the temporary guardian, I am ordering continued guardianship by Officer Reyes for a period of 6 months, with reevaluation scheduled at the end of that term. The mother may continue monitored visitation and communication, but will not regain custody at this time. Naomi exhaled so hard her shoulders dropped. Reyes didn't smile. He couldn't, not yet, but he squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back. It wasn't a final answer, but it was time to grow more roots, time to prove, once again, that love could be steady, that staying could be stronger than returning. Later, as they drove back home, in the soft rain, Naomi watched the window quietly. Then she said, "It's like we're halfway to forever." Reyes glanced at her. "Then I guess we better keep walking." She smiled, and for the first time in days, it reached all the way to her eyes. The 6-month guardianship extension shifted everything without changing much at all. On the surface, life moved forward in the same rhythms it had settled into: morning alarms, lunchboxes packed with tiny notes, therapy sessions on Thursdays, and bedtime rituals that always included Maya's favorite stuffed bear and Naomi's whispered "Good night, Dad," before switching off her lamp. But under that steady routine, something deeper began to unfold. The pressure of impermanence had eased, even if only slightly, and with that release came space for Naomi to stop scanning every room for the nearest exit, for Reyes to let go of the gnawing doubt that he was just a placeholder, and for both of them to start believing, quietly, that maybe this strange, beautiful life they were building could actually last. Naomi blossomed, not loudly, not all at once, but in deliberate, graceful steps. She began participating more in class, joining her school's art club, and even raising her hand to read aloud, something that had terrified her months ago. She wrote poems and taped them to the kitchen fridge. She invented bedtime stories for Maya that involved magic turtles and flying bicycles. Her laughter became louder, less guarded, and when she tripped over something in the hallway or spilled juice across the kitchen floor, she didn't flinch or apologize like she used to. Instead, she laughed, grabbed a towel, and moved on. Reyes noticed all of it, and while he said little, he documented every change like milestones in his heart. Maya, now wobbling between furniture and clapping her hands every time she successfully crossed the living room, became a daily reminder of joy in motion. She was loud, expressive, endlessly curious. She had a favorite sock she refused to take off, and a tendency to burst into squeals of laughter when Naomi made up silly dances. Reyes couldn't get enough of it. The girl who nearly slipped away in that small apartment months ago had turned into a whirlwind of life and noise, and every diaper change, every sleepless night, every ear-splitting tantrum somehow made Reyes feel more anchored than he ever had in his adult life. But the outside world didn't pause just because they had found their rhythm. Reyes still worked shifts at the precinct, still dealt with petty crimes and paperwork, and still came home some nights too tired to do anything but sink into the couch. The difference now was that someone was waiting, more than one someone. And the apartment, once a quiet bachelor space with minimal furniture and maximum empty walls, had transformed into a lived-in, loud, occasionally chaotic haven. There were fingerprints on the windows, plastic cups in the sink, and a box of emergency toys in the trunk of his cruiser. And for the first time, when he looked around, he didn't see a space that had been invaded. He saw a life that had expanded. The question of what happens next still loomed, of course. Naomi's mother continued sending letters. Some were warm, some were messy. Some hinted at regret, while others stumbled into defensiveness. Reyes never filtered them. He let Naomi read them, respond if she wanted, ignore them if she didn't. He didn't control the narrative. He just made sure Naomi knew she had the right to choose what she held on to and what she let go. One evening, Naomi brought one of the letters to him. She said she might be moving again. Naomi muttered, "I think she means another halfway house." Reyes nodded. "That's hard." Naomi looked up. "Do you think she'll ever be okay?" Reyes thought for a moment. "I think she wants to be, and I think wanting matters, but being okay, that takes time. And help. And sometimes people need more of both than they think." Naomi folded the letter carefully and tucked it into a drawer. "I hope she gets it. But I don't want to go yet. Maybe not ever." That was the moment Reyes knew. Not just knew, but felt it in his bones. This wasn't temporary. It couldn't be. It wasn't just that Naomi and Maya had fit into his life. It was that he had become woven into theirs. The thought of someone else stepping in now, trying to take over, wasn't just unthinkable. It was wrong. These weren't children he was caring for. They were his girls, his daughters. And he wanted it to be official. The next morning he called Tanya. "I want to pursue permanent guardianship," he said. "Maybe even adoption, if that's possible." Tanya didn't sound surprised. "I had a feeling this was coming," she replied warmly. "I'll talk to the family court. It'll take time. You know that, but we can begin the process." Reyes exhaled. "I know it's going to be messy." "It might be," she said, "but you've already walked through messy, and you're still here." He didn't tell Naomi right away. He waited until the paperwork was filed, until Tanya confirmed that the petition had been accepted for consideration. Then one evening, while they sat on the living room floor, building a puzzle with Maya chewing on the corner of the box, he turned to her and said, "I want to ask you something." Naomi glanced up, curious. "It's kind of a big deal." She straightened. "Okay, I've asked the court if I can be your legal guardian. Permanently. That means no more reviews every few months. No more waiting. It would make this," he gestured around, "official." Naomi didn't answer right away. She just stared at him, eyes wide, lips pressed tightly together. Then she said, "Would that mean I get to stay forever?" Reyes nodded. "Yes. If the court approves, and if you want it." Naomi exhaled, so sharply it sounded like something leaving her. Then she crawled across the floor and hugged him, tight. "For a long time. I want that," she whispered. "I want that more than anything." Maya squealed at the movement and clapped her hands. Naomi laughed through tears. "She agrees," she said. The petition, of course, wasn't simple. Naomi's mother had to be notified. She had the right to contest it. There would be hearings, arguments, evaluations. But Reyes wasn't afraid. Not this time. He had Naomi's voice. He had the truth of what they had built. He had their stories, their milestones, their fridge full of artwork and cabinets full of sippy cups. He had late-night talks and grocery store giggles, and a name she sometimes whispered when she thought he wasn't listening, Dad. And so they waited. Together. Not with fear, but with hope. Because they weren't just halfway to forever anymore. They were walking toward it. The morning of the final hearing arrived cloaked in a softness that almost felt symbolic. The sky was a sheet of pale gray, the air still like the world itself was holding its breath. Officer David Reyes stood at the kitchen counter, pouring hot water over 2 mugs of tea, chamomile for Naomi and black coffee for himself. Naomi sat at the table in her favorite hoodie, fingers tracing slow patterns across the wood, eyes focused and far away. Maya, now walking confidently, toddled around the living room in search of her stuffed rabbit, her giggles rising every time she tripped and caught herself. It was surreal to think how far they had come, from that frantic knock on his cruiser window, to this morning a family, by every measure except ink and paper. And now they were about to try and make it official. Reyes had stayed up late, reviewing the case file one last time, going over everything Tanya had told him. The hearing today was different. This wasn't a check-in. It wasn't an extension. This was the moment where the court would decide whether Naomi and Maya would stay with him permanently, or whether their futures would be rerouted once again. They arrived early. Tanya was already waiting at the courthouse, file in hand, expression unreadable, but warm. "You ready?" she asked Naomi, as they walked inside. Naomi nodded. "I'm not scared this time." Tanya smiled. "You don't have to be. You're walking in with the truth." Inside courtroom 2C, the judge from previous hearings presided once more, her eyes scanning the room with the same quiet intensity Naomi had come to recognize. Naomi's biological mother was present via video call, her face thinner, eyes heavy with the weight of every choice and consequence that had led to this moment. She didn't speak right away, neither did Reyes. The room was still waiting. Tanya began with a summary. Naomi's progress in school, Maya's development, the stable home environment, the therapist recommendation. Then came Reyes's testimony. He spoke not as an officer of the law, but as a man who had fallen into fatherhood through chaos and discovered it was exactly where he belonged. "This wasn't part of a plan," he said. "I didn't expect it. I didn't chase it. But these girls walked into my life and changed everything. I don't see this as a rescue story. I see it as a story of becoming. I didn't save them. They showed me who I could be." Then it was Naomi's turn. She stood slowly, walked up to the front of the courtroom in black sneakers and a nervous half-smile, and turned to face the judge. "I used to think families were just something you got," she began. "You were born into them, and that was it. But now I think families are also something you build. You choose them, and they choose you back." She paused, breathing in slowly. "My mom, she's trying. I believe that, and I hope she gets better. But I'm not ready to go back. I'm safe now. I'm loved now. I want to stay with David. I want him to be my dad." Silence fell like a blanket. The judge cleared her throat, adjusted her glasses, and then turned to the screen. "Miss Sanders," she said, addressing Naomi's mother, "do you wish to speak?" For a moment nothing happened. Then the woman on screen nodded, leaned closer, and said softly, "Naomi, I'm proud of you. I messed up. And I know I can't fix everything. But if staying with him is what you need, then I won't fight that. I want you to be happy." Naomi's lips parted slightly, eyes widening, and for a moment she didn't know what to say. But Reyes stepped closer, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. She looked up and nodded once. It was all she could give, and all that was needed. The ruling came minutes later. It is the finding of this court that permanent guardianship of minors Naomi and Maya Sanders shall be granted to David Reyes effective immediately. Adoption proceedings may be initiated at the guardian's discretion. The gavel fell, and just like that the weight of uncertainty began to lift. They walked out of the courtroom into the kind of silence that follows something monumental, not loud or triumphant, just reverent. Naomi didn't speak until they reached the car. Then she turned to Reyes and said, "Does this mean I get to pick my own middle name?" He laughed. "Is that really the first thing you want to do?" She grinned. "Maybe. I've been thinking about it for weeks." "All right then," he said. "We'll talk names over dinner." That night they celebrated at home with takeout pizza and sparkling apple juice. Maya chewed happily on a breadstick while Naomi opened a small gift box Reyes had tucked under her plate. Inside was a silver necklace with two small charms, one with an engraved N and the other with an M. "We're a team," he said, smiling. "All three of us." The days that followed felt lighter. Naomi seemed taller somehow, not physically, but in presence. She made jokes more often. She danced in the kitchen with Maya when the radio played old 90s songs. She asked questions about how mortgages worked and what kind of car she might drive when she turned 16. Reyes marveled at the way she shifted from cautious to curious, from guarded to growing. He knew there would still be hard days, nights when memories returned, moments when loss still stung, but now they had a foundation to stand on, something that no one could undo. One evening, while folding laundry, Naomi asked him, "Why did you really say yes to all of this, back at the beginning?" Reyes folded a shirt, placed it on the pile, and thought about it. "Because I saw you running," he said, "and something in me knew I wasn't just supposed to help that day. I was supposed to keep showing up, and once I started, I couldn't stop caring." She looked at him for a long moment. "You're really not going anywhere, are you?" He shook his head. "Not a chance." Then she smiled, a full, unguarded smile, and said, "Good, because I like having a dad." That night, after both girls were asleep, Naomi sprawled across her bed with a book open on her chest, and Maya curled into a ball in her crib with a rabbit tucked under one arm. Reyes stood in the doorway of their rooms and exhaled. Not the exhale of exhaustion, but the kind of breath you release when you realize the storm has passed and the roof held firm. He walked to the living room, sat down in the armchair and looked around the apartment. Toys on the rug, crayons on the table, a blanket tossed half-folded across the back of the couch. It didn't look like his old life. It didn't look like any plan he had ever made. But it was his. And more importantly, it was theirs. He reached for his phone, opened a blank note, and typed 5 simple words. "We made it. We stayed." And for the first time in years, he felt whole.